Since about 7 years now, I joined Electra as a research fellow funded by the Abdal International Center of Theoretical Physics in Italy. Before I start my talk, I would like to say how much I'm excited to be here in my homeland, Palestine, because I'm originally from Nablus, although I live in Jordan. So I'm Jordanian, Palestinian. I have two hearts inside. And it gives me a great pleasure to be in Birzeit for the first time, because although I joined many of this conference series in different Palestinian cities, I missed the first one in 2008. I didn't hear about it. I was a PhD student, and probably it's the fault of my ex-professors and ex-advisors that they did not tell me about the conference in Birzeit. So I was awaiting for it. I was looking for it. Actually, in all conferences, the driving force that brings me together with people is physics. But when it comes to the Palestinian conference in Palestine, what drives me to come is Palestine itself, is my emotion, let's say, and the atmosphere that I miss in other conferences. The atmosphere is different in Palestine, in all terms, even in terms of the friends, the international friends that you meet. So for me, this picture worth a lot in my life. I was waiting for it since 4 years. So I'm happy that I did it again.
We're lucky to have you with us.
Thank you, thank you. So now the title of my presentation, JUVAC, the University of Jordan Van de Graaff Accelerator. As I said, I'm flying from Italy to Jordan, then I cross the bridge to come to Palestine. And I have been in Italy during this period for a full year, and I'm starting, inshallah, another year once I get the approval of my university. This could let you expect that I would present part of my research work in this prestigious accelerator at Electra, at this paradise in Italy, at Trieste. Especially that I worked with big group of nice people, and I really have good scientific record during the past 7 years done at Electra. But coming to Palestine and being originally born as a scientist in JUVAC, I felt more responsible to talk about JUVAC to the Palestinian community, because when I started to look through the history of JUVAC, I found many names whom I met during the previous conferences, the Palestinian conferences, who got their master's degree or who did their research project at the University of Jordan at JUVAC. But surprisingly, nowadays, you never see a single professor, a single researcher, a single student from Palestine coming to JUVAC for training, for visiting, for collaborating. So it's a pity. We are the closest scientific center to Palestine. So I thought it's a responsibility to talk about it. Now, this is, let's say, the personal point of view, why I'm talking about JUVAC in Palestine. But what motivates me to talk about JUVAC everywhere, always, why I'm always motivated to present the history, the story of JUVAC. Why JUVAC? I think this picture can summarize the motivation. It gives me the whole hope that I collected over the years, and it reminded me also by a big sorrow that I learned or I tasted before the hope and the happiness and the pleasure. This, it looks like a cartoon picture, but it's not a cartoon picture. Have a look to this ladder. As you can see, the ladder is, you can call it broken, you can say it's damaged, but if you are more optimistic, like myself, you would see it's not broken, it's not damaged, it's missing 1 or 2 rungs. So it can be used. Here is a rung missing or broken, and there is another one. I put this picture because I remember when I joined the University of Jordan as a professor for the first time, 2013, I was warned by, do you hear me? I was warned by some colleagues at the university, look, it's nice that you got a position finally, and you are a graduate from the University of Jordan, so you are a graduate in a developing country. It's nice that you got a position, but don't aim much from working at this accelerator. You know, it's like you are driving a second-hand car, or it's like you are getting up using a broken ladder. Make sure that you don't fall down, and make sure that safety is much more important than your dreams and your imagination and your dedication towards this lab. You keep saying, I was born in this lab. Make sure you don't fall down because you are using a broken ladder. At that time, I was still in my early stage of my career. But I was strong enough, probably because I have nothing to lose. So I have nothing in hand. So I was strong enough to reply, no, I can. I will not through this ladder. It's the only thing that I have, so it will get me up. It will lift me up to higher levels. And for that reason, I would say this is a motivation why I'm presenting the story of JUVAC. And at that moment, at the very early moment, I asked myself this question: can such old, sick accelerator boost my career as a tenure track scientist or a tenure track professor? Because in my university, if you get a position, you are in tenure track. If you did not get promoted within 5-6 years, you will be fired, simply. So you are always under pressure. So I was under pressure. My love to JUVAC and my wish to get promoted and then tenured. It was not easy, especially in Jordan, and I believe that the people in Palestine know this challenge. And the other question, or put it another way, can a broken ladder or a ladder of a missing rung can lift me up? My goal from this presentation is to convince you, yes, definitely yes. And for that reason, I would say the title that you saw in the beginning of my slides, which is submitted to the scientific committee, JUVAC, the University of Jordan Van de Graaff Accelerator, Challenges and Future Prospects, is not a real title. This is the title that I submit to any scientific committee to accept me to come to the conference. But the title that was in my mind, probably this one, Shedding Light on JUVAC Facility. And to be more precisely, if you allow me to speak from my heart, it was actually this one. JUVAC on love and determination that overcome challenges and limitation. Let's start the story of JUVAC. What is JUVAC? JUVAC stands for the University of Jordan Van de Graaff Accelerator. It's a facility of ions dedicated to science. It's located in my beloved university, the University of Jordan, where I got all the degrees of my education, the bachelor and the PhD, because I don't have master. And here is the JUVAC facility building, and by the way, it is attached to the mathematics building in the University of Jordan, not attached to the physics, because it existed before building the mathematics department. And sometimes, when people raise the point that this is an old facility, the mathematics department join this group of people and say, okay, give us the building. We need the building if this is an old facility. Take your physics and leave us the building. But this is the original building of JUVAC, which is the octagonal column that you see here. And this is the mathematics department.
Which year was it built?
You will see. The building was built at the end of 1978, but it was not opened till the machine arrived in 1980s. So JUVAC, it's basically electrostatic linear accelerator of Van de Graaff type, and it was manufactured by High Voltage Engineering Company. It started working as a grant from Germany in the early 1980s. I was born exactly in 1980. So I am used to tell my student, I am, and my accelerator, we are in the same age. That's why we understand each other. And the energy range of JUVAC, was supposed to be up to 4.75 mega electron volt. However, nowadays, we are unable to reach this value. We can go smoothly to 1 MeV or a bit higher, let's say around 2 or maximum 2.5 MeV. But for me, it's good enough to do good science. And the ions that can be produced by JUVAC, you can produce any kind of single ions. And because there is a gas stripper, which was designed during my PhD work, we can also produce multiply charged ions. So it can accelerate any kind of single ions, and we can produce multiply charged ions. Basically, JUVAC facility can host up to 7 beam lines, which means up to 7 experiments. Over the years, there were no more than 3 operational beam times at a time. There are still 4 boards closed, not touched, never attached to an experiment. So there is a room to host new ideas, to host new experiments. My hope that one day, probably my students will add to these beam lines, as I did when I was a PhD student and when I joined as a researcher. Why JUVAC is special for Jordan? Because when it was a grant from Germany in 1980s, it was the first and the only ion beam analysis in Jordan. And it's still, there is no ion beam facility in Jordan other than JUVAC. And having Sesame does not eliminate the role of JUVAC. I am a member of Sesame Users Committee, Jordan's member in this committee. These are 2 different kinds of accelerators. So it's still the only ion beam facility. Why it's special for me? Because I was born there as a scientist. I got my PhD in early 2010 from JUVAC. And now let's go to the physics of JUVAC. I said it's Van de Graaff accelerator. So the basic principle of any Van de Graaff accelerator is simply the Van de Graaff generator. And I'm sure, if not all, most of you are familiar with this kind of generator from the school. And probably you had this experience. And hopefully you know that the inventor who makes your hair stand on end is this guy, Robert Van de Graaff. In his honor was named the Van de Graaff generator. And the physics principle is very simple. You produce high voltage on this metallic terminal, we call it dome. This sphere, we call it dome. You produce or you collect or you accumulate high voltage on this terminal by mechanically moving electrostatic charge produced in this moving belt. Because, as you know, the electric field inside the conductor is zero. So the charge cannot reside inside. It will reside on the surface of the conductor. So it will be accumulated. But it will not be accumulated forever. At certain point, there will be a breakdown unless you enclose this generator inside the tank. And now you are preserving the high voltage. And if you add an accelerating tube, I mean, if you insert an ion source, the generator becomes an accelerator. So this is the basic principle of Van de Graaff accelerator. And this schematic diagram is very similar to the sketch of the Van de Graaff accelerator in the University of Jordan. And our dome is exactly like this dome. It's not sphere, it's cylindrical. And here is a schematic diagram of JUVAC. You can see this is the dome, the cylindrical dome. Here is the tank that will cover the Van de Graaff when it accumulates high voltage to preserve the charge. And our accelerator is in vertical position, so you can consider this is the first floor and below is the ground floor. So as the accelerator is in vertical position, we need a magnet to bend the beam. And then we need another magnet to steer the beam, to choose which experiment. Here are more details about the parts in the schematic diagram. And this is an actual view of JUVAC once the accelerator tank is open. So you see here is the accelerator tank, and here is the Van de Graaff. Here is the cylindrical dome where the high voltage is produced or collected. And this is another view while the tank is open and lifted up. And if you are interested to see it live, I mean to see how this tank will be closed after finishing the maintenance or the cleaning stuff of JUVAC, you can access, but not now. Now please stay engaged with me. You can access the YouTube channel of JUVAC. You will find a short video, less than 1 minute. Okay, as I mentioned, JUVAC is in vertical position. So in order to bend the beam, we need analyzing magnet, and then to select the experiment, we need a switching magnet, and then you find yourself at the end station of each beam lines. Here you can see there are only 3 beam lines attached among the 7 boards. And to give you a flavor of what this machine or facility looks like inside, I would like to share with you this short video. رجع الشعر. I hope you will hear. It's a good chance to drink water. Going to the second floor now. Here's the accelerator tank. A storage tank in order not to withdraw the gases. Now we go back downstairs. Qualified students, it's not me. That's all for this video, and it was produced by Lambda Physics Group. I may tell you about Lambda later. Now, to continue the story, what kind of support we get at JUVAC? In terms of money, unfortunately, there is almost no support. There is a very limited fund from the university, but it's not accessible. Most of the time, it's not accessible. However, I managed to make projects with the IAEA, and this is the only sort of fund, actually a real fund that we have, but they support technically. Let's say they support by sending you an expert to visit your lab, or by sending you to visit another lab or to get a beam time. It's very rare, and according to their regulations, they cannot fund equipment. However, in my case, I succeeded more than 2 or 3 times to convince IAEA to provide equipment to JUVAC. It happened. I didn't give up, I kept insisting, and I got it. And others, this is a broad window. Others means colleagues, conferences, friends, by coincidence. I go to a conference, I present an experiment, I show some experimental limitations. Somebody told me, you are looking for a particle detector? We have worked one that we didn't use. Can I ship it to you to Jordan? This is others. And it helped me a lot. And in terms of infrastructure, when JUVAC was brought as a gift from Germany, they also gifted the university with 2 workshops, one electronic workshop and one mechanical workshop, and we rely on these 2 units to help us build and modify some equipment at JUVAC. In terms of research programs, what I learned, even when I was a student, that in order to survive in an accelerator, you need to have 2 hats. A hat like applicational science, another hat like a curious scientist, to do whatever you love. So this is what I'm doing in JUVAC. When I have the chance to do basic research, which is my first passion, I do basic research to enjoy, to be pleased. But to get fund, I do research that is applicational and that is under the priorities of the IAEA, because you know the IAEA supports research projects that support the human life and sustainable development. In terms of partnership, I managed through conferences, through IAEA project, to make many friends over all the world and to make many collaborators who help me also scientifically and technically. Now let's say what science can be done, let's see what science can be done at JUVAC. What operational techniques or beamlines at JUVAC briefly. In principle, JUVAC is ion beam facility. So whatever method of ion beam analysis you wish to apply, you can do it at JUVAC. The key is to bring your detector. If you have X-ray detector, you can do BICSI. If you have gamma detector, you can do BT. If you have particle detector, you can do RPS. I would like to say, nowadays, we have only detectors for RPS and BICSI, but there is room in the chamber to add more detectors. If we have more funds, we could do something, they call it total IBA, to do all IBA techniques in one run, one experimental run, one chamber. This is one of my future dreams, but I'm sure one day it will happen, inshallah. The 2 basic IBA techniques at JUVAC, BICSI, particle-induced X-ray emission, RBS, Rutherford backscattering spectrometry. The basics of these techniques we normally teach to the student in the course of modern physics, so they are easy. This is the BICSI RBS beamline at JUVAC. Now, other sophisticated techniques which are related more to the basic science, an example for that, the coincident Rutherford backscattering spectrometry. In this technique, we don't do the Rutherford backscattering spectrometry that you studied in the modern physics that was done by Rutherford. We do more elaboration. We make the target gaseous, so we don't only study the backscattered projectile, but we study also the recoil target. And this is a simulation of this is violent ion atom collision. And this is an actual view of CRBS beamline at JUVAC, which I built when I was a PhD student. Another sophisticated experiment related to basic atomic and molecular physics called TRIMS, cold target recoil ion momentum spectroscopy, which was developed at JUVAC for the first time by my ex-advisor, Dr. Rami Ali and his collaborators. And this is an imaging technique to basically get more information about all the fragments in ion atom collision. And this is an actual view of the cold TRIMS beamline at JUVAC. What kind of research studies have been done at JUVAC? If I wanted to make a summary of all what has been done over the years, from the early 80s up to the 2022, I will not finish. But with what I will present here is a summary of the last 10 years. If you read through these articles or access them online, you will see that, let's start from the oldest. This one related to basic science, CRPS. This is related to application, solar cells. This is related to basic science, charge state studies. And this is called TRIMS, basic atomic and molecular. And this is environmental pollution, applicational side. And this is also about environmental pollution or aerosol samples, also applicational side. So you can see that we jump from application to basic science. We get funds, we get pleasure. And that's how we survive. and life is going on. Now, I would like to share with you some early memories from JUVAC, which is for me, it's something like before birth, before I was involved. Probably I was a kid at that time. But I found these memories. Some of them, I found them from international scientists that I met in conferences. When they read that I am from the University of Jordan, they share with me some photos, some brochures from Jordan, which I didn't find in my university. So while I'm showing these memories, I would like to say how much JUVAC was really important, and they were celebrating of it at its beginning. But then the interest faded with time. This is one point. The other point, I would like to encourage you or your professors, if they have taken time at the University of Jordan during their studies, those who worked with Abdal Hakeem Hannoon, Kamal Saleh, Maruf al-Haj, Nasser Saleh. If you have memories, I'm sure you have, please share it with me. Because since I joined the university, I started my own project of collecting all history about JUVAC. I believe this was not documented. And it's also part of my wish list and my students to make this one day documented. So let's see. This photo, probably the first photo of the control room at JUVAC. This guy was the head of the Department of Physics at that time. He's Dr. Aouni Halaq. And now he's not part of the university. He left to another university. This photo was taken in 1983 while a professor from Germany was visiting JUVAC. And even though at that time, in celebration of this, one of the printed newspapers of the university make a special article dedicated about JUVAC, and they call it Accelerator on campus. Imagine, it's like they celebrate. We have an accelerator. Now, nobody looks at it unless those crazy people who are experimentalists and who wish to spend hours doing an experiment, like the speaker. Also, at that period, there was a bulletin, you cannot read it probably, published in December 1983, and on the cover page, there was the schematic diagram of the JUVAC building. You remember the octagonal building I showed at the beginning? It was on the cover page. Now, that was the early memories, short early memories that I had before I joined JUVAC. You may ask, how I did join JUVAC? Okay. I joined JUVAC in 2005 as a PhD student. Thanks to these two gentlemen, they were my PhD advisors, and I did at that time, with their help and guidance, an experiment, the first of its kind in atomic and molecular physics at JUVAC and in the region. However, they were not the key reason why I loved to work at JUVAC. The reason goes back to 2000, when I was a freshman student, a bachelor student. At that time, I got an invitation from my professor who taught me Physics 101 and 102, because you know, in Physics 101 and 102, you teach acceleration, electric force, magnetic force. All these concepts are the basic concepts that we deal with on daily basis at JUVAC. So he invited me to visit this JUVAC. I didn't know what kind of lab it would be. I entered there and I fell in love. Simply, at that moment, I decided I will be a scientist. I will come back to this lab. I will be a researcher in it. I took a decision in 2000. And then I started to look to scientists doing research there, because this advisor, this mentor, he was a teacher. He was not doing any more research in JUVAC. But let's say he felt the responsibility. And years after, he called me that he wanted me to host his students to explain to them about my experiment, because I became the principal scientist at JUVAC. He paid me the visit in 2000, and years after, he accompanied his bachelor students. And by the way, I learned a lesson from him. If you want the facility to flourish, keep it attached to students. Invest in the students. Don't rely much on well-established people. Rely more on those young generation. They have a fresh mind, they have white page in their career. They want to write something amazing, something with the wow factor. So Accelerator would fit their needs. So this is a summary of my timeline at JUVAC. I said I visited the facility in 2000. Then I started my first experiment as PhD student in 2005. Probably this square has shifted up. I wanted to say, among this timeline, there were two destinations in my trip who changed my mind. The first destination in 2009, when I got the first opportunity to go abroad to attend a school in ICTB. And the other one, when I got a fellowship as a researcher in Eritrea, after I got my position in the university, and since then, I became Eritrea collaborator. These two opportunities changed my life. Before these opportunities, I was attached to my laboratory as this our grandma. Whenever I was working on the experiment, there is a conference, there is a workshop, while I was a PhD student, I always say I'm busy. I should focus on my experiment. And also my supervisor, once I told him about the visit to ICTB, he said, Hanan, who looks after the accelerator? Who looks after your experiment? You wanted to go for Italy. I said, it's 1 week. It's 1 week. And he said, who looks after your accelerator? So at the beginning of my life, my scientific life, I was so much attached to the accelerator. But then I learned a lesson. When I saw the atmosphere in ICTB and in Eritrea, I took a decision. I am attached to this lab, but I should fly with my wings to other laboratories. And I should scatter my students everywhere. In Europe, in Pakistan, in ICTB, and CERN. And they come back with a new experience. And I offered them what I didn't get when I was a student. But this doesn't mean that I'm disconnected from my lab. I am still connected. And if you go to the timeline, you see that the last PhD thesis defended at JUVAC was mine. And the most recent master thesis produced and defended at JUVAC is also mine. It's for my student in 2019. So what kept me in this challenging atmosphere? Many things, not only science, not only physics. Among all those things, challenges. Challenges are the most important thing that kept my root attached to JUVAC. Because when you see the challenge, you know it's your way. If the way is without challenges, you are probably on the wrong way. So these are the challenges of JUVAC. I will skip the technical challenges, but I will focus on these. No fund, no specialized operator, no technician, no interested colleagues, no group. This is what I found at ICTB and Eritrea. I found group, I found environment, I found support. When I have a problem, I call the technician. This is what we lack. But as a Palestinian, although not living in Palestine, I learned a lesson. Not all obstacles are killing us. Some obstacles are helping us to develop new muscles. So I developed new muscles through my journey at JUVAC. And I also learned from my sisters and brothers in Palestine that probably this is not the proper way to overcome the border or to overcome the apartheid wall. It's not the best way. There are other ways. You could overcome this obstacle by so many ways. You just think outside the traditional way. This is also another way. So I learned a lesson. What should I do with what I have? There is a lot to do. The first thing to start, don't panic that I started with nothing. I remember the guy who told me about the broken ladder. He means my accelerator, yes. I received the accelerator old, sick, empty chamber, no vacuum system, no single detector. But I had one thing, interest. I had interest, so I started to present my work, to tell the story, and I got funds from outside. I got support from friends that probably I met for the first time in life. And my credo at that time was I should not panic. I should not complain. I should just keep going. Even if slow, I will get my destination. Because I have a ladder. better than those who have nothing. And I started with connecting the new generation. Every year, when I teach Physics 101, Physics 102, Modern Physics, Atomic and Molecular Physics, my students have a tour or two in JUVAC. And I'm glad to say, all those who entered JUVAC, they ended up with good training, with good scholarships abroad. And they are not only physicists. You can find among them chemists, engineers, over many generations. Also, during my work at JUVAC, I had the pleasure to be a national leader of many IAA projects, which became my only fund and helped me and helped my students. And also, through such projects and meetings, I managed to make many international and regional collaboration, where those collaborators ended up as friends also. And I hosted many experts at JUVAC. This was in 2016. This was another expert mission of 2 scientists in 2020, just before COVID. And I supervised students, and I held also regional training courses, not only for the people in Jordan, but for the region, for the Arab countries. This is a photo from one of the training course, and I was very proud in this training course for many reasons, but I will highlight 2. One of them, that my organizing committee was only this committee, myself and my student. This little girl was my master student. She was my right hand. I remember some colleagues in the department were jealous when they read her name in the organizing committee. The other thing that I was proud of in this school, that I managed to connect generations. In the, call it conference dinner, I invited my ex-advisor as a guest, as an honorary guest, and his ex-mentor, his teacher. And this smile, because before the photo he was telling this old professor, look, Hanan is my daughter, and I am proud that Sarah, whom I met for the first time, is my granddaughter. So with science, you can also connect generations. And this is the last thing of what I did to overcome that wall, or to get up with that broken ladder. Nowadays, this is the most recent. Nowadays, I'm supervising a research project of a bachelor student. Ruba will be the first bachelor student to do her research at JUVAC. And last May, she presented part of her work in a conference in Vienna, and it was her first international scientific participation. Looking toward the future, as it is a story, I have no conclusion, but I would like to say this story should not end. As long as we breathe the air, as long as we have students, which means we have hope. So probably someone else will take the torch and continue. And if you allow me for a few takeaway messages to wrap up the story, I would like to say, I always believed there is no better place to enjoy experimental physics than an accelerator laboratory. And for me, although I wandered many accelerators and I have the pleasure to work in them, the best place to disseminate your experimental physics is JUVAC. Also, if you have an accelerator, look after your accelerator. Keep attached to your accelerator, because your accelerator is your treasure. But also, don't stay too much attached. Fly out, go abroad, because many accelerators are better than one. And if you have students, invest in your students. Don't panic about money. Invest in your students. Your students, your only resources. Give them support, give them knowledge. Most important, give them trust and love. And you will be amazed with what they give you back. And keep patient. Life is not easy for any of us. So how for physicists? How for experimentalists? This is the norm. Life is not easy. Keep patient with patience and resilience. You will reach your goal. The journey probably, most likely, will not be short, will not be fast, but for sure it will be enjoyable if you choose what you love. And don't throw your ladder. Don't throw your ladder. it might be the only way to lift you up. That's almost all. So I hope I convinced you that JUVAC deserve long life and love. And in terms of acknowledgement, I'm grateful to all those institutes who supported me in a way or another over the stages of my career. I should highlight that I'm grateful to my university for the moral support. I am grateful to all colleagues and ex-advisors and ex-mentors in my university, those who trusted in my abilities and supported me morally, and those who told me, don't use this ladder in your early career. And also, when I talk about the university, I should also thank all my students over the years, because they were the most important people that trusted in my abilities and that are carrying my vision to the world. And particularly, I should thank Lambda Physics Group at the University of Jordan. This is a group of physics lovers and fans. I initiated this group for the first time in 2015, and I'm still supervising them. I can tell you, when I emailed them in my way to Palestine, I'm going to talk about JUVAC. Can you make a short video? They did the video in less than 2 days. So the video that I presented was produced by Lambda, and that's all. Sorry. Thank you very much. You can ask me in the coffee break to make the chairman happy.
So thank you, Dr. Hanan, again.
I'm sorry I couldn't make it shorter.
No worries, no worries. I think there is hopefully a bit of time for questions during the coffee break.